Welcome to a very special live episode of Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Wednesday, September 25th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Michigan State game in 3 days, the game against Michigan in 66 days.
Is that right?
Get a chance to, that is a fact, Tony. Would I lie to you? The answer is not about this. I'm also not going to lie about what we did today. Got a chance to talk to Ohio State head coach Ryan Day, defensive coordinator Jim Knowles, starting quarterback Will Howard. Coming off of a game where the Buckeyes won 49-14, and everyone was, for the most part, very happy about the offense and sort of, let's say, a mixed bag on the defense. Tony, I feel like we got to start with the defense because that was sort of the big topic of conversation throughout the day. Let's start with the update on Tyleik Williams, defensive tackle, obviously missed last week's game. What's the latest on Tyleik Williams and his chance to play this weekend?
Day to day, they're going to put him out there and see if he can go today. According to Ryan Day, they'll see if he can go. They plan on doing that and seeing how things work out for him. But day to day, Jim Knowles did say they hope he can play. So that's
I'm sure that's true.
That's two coaches saying, hey, possibly he could be out there.
And if he's not able to be out there, we saw a whole bunch of the younger guys get a chance to play there last weekend, and this was one of the times where I think Ryan Day used the phrase mixed bag at one point. But what was their assessment of the play of some of the younger guys playing on the interior of the defensive line last week?
Some good, some not so good, basically. Like
you take the good,
you take the bad, you take them both, and there you have the facts of life. The facts of life. There's a time, but yeah, well, when asked about them, the young guys, the first guy I think Jim Knowles talked about was Taiwan Malone, who is a fourth-year junior, so not exactly a young guy, but a guy that is still gaining experience, made a couple plays, but it's about consistency for all of these guys. And when asked if Taiwan Malone would start this week, if Tyleik Williams can't go, that's when Jim Knowles said, well, we're hoping Tyleik can, so we haven't discussed that yet. But I think everybody saw him make a couple of plays in there. I know the one on the fourth down stop, people are like, well, the quarterback just fell, but Taiwan Malone was there.
Yes.
And there were guys behind him. So I think that play was going to be stopped regardless. But, Cade McDonald, Jason Moore, Will Smith, Hero Canoe, just consistency is the key. And you might make one play, and he's talking about making a play outside of your gap and how that's only kind of good because they still need them to be disciplined and trustworthy. Basically, I know where you're going to be on every single play, and if you're not there, then that creates issues. You may get away with it this time, but next time it's an issue. And as we know, Jim Knowles is talking about spending his off week at looking at how teams can take advantage of what they've done to this point. And when you see guys that are maybe out of your gaps or not as strong at the point of attack, it creates concern.
Now, he did lay out a very specific circumstance in which he's okay with guys being out of their gaps.
That was correct. He said if somebody does their job initially, then gets out of the gap and makes the play 100% of the time, that's cool. So he's cool with that. So a high bar, but still, you know what? Everybody's striving for perfection. So would you recommend a defensive tackle strive for perfection outside of his gaps?
Tony, the standard is the standard, as they say quite a bit around here. The standard is the standard with the pass rush as well. Good. And that's something where I think if you ask the average Ohio State fan where they would grade the pass rush last week, they had, one sack last week, I believe. It was Caden Curry. If you ask the average Ohio State fan to grade the pass rush and just in terms of the number of sacks, the grade would probably not be great, but it sounds like, the standard is the standard, and just purely that number is not necessarily what they're looking at in terms of the standard there.
I felt like Ryan Day, when he was asked about this, was kind of like, everybody gather around.
It was a little irritated, right?
Listen. And he's like, this is a message for us and for the team as well. Like, you defend what you're seeing. And if a team doesn't want to give up any sacks, they can just RPO you. And they're not going to hold on to the ball because it's either going to be a quick read or a handoff. So you're not going to get there. And when they're not doing that, you're seeing some quick throws. So like if a team doesn't want to just drop back, he said, no team's just going to drop back for 5 seconds and wait to get hit. And so he was just like, understand, we are going to defend what we are seeing. We're not going to try to defend what we're not seeing. Like you're just tearing up field against, something that the RPO or whatever, and you're still hitting the quarterback 3 seconds after he's gotten rid of the ball. How's that pass rush? It's not helping. So, there is no pass rush when it's just you read one guy and either you throw it or you hand it off. It's just boom, boom. It's instantaneous. So you can't get there. But he did say, like, there are different ways you can do some other things to attack if you're not getting, home when you have an opportunity. But just the numbers of opportunities have been limited based on the way offenses are going right now, and you have to defend what you're seeing, Tom.
You do, and so there's been that's the defensive line, and there's certainly been some consternation there. There's also been a little bit of consternation around the play of the linebackers and some of the consistency there as well. What did Day and Jim Knowles have to say about them?
And Jim Knowles initially was like, "Hey, tell us about the linebackers." And, they're doing well. They know their assignments, and he's complimenting. And then he goes, "But the tackling, they've got to get better at the tackling, and it's something that you can't practice. There's not a lot, not much live tackling in practice. So practicing is going on now. That's maybe the best part about these preseason games, these non-conference games, as you can work on that." But then he said, and then once you do start tackling correctly, are you giving up 3 yards or are you giving up 5 yards? Because that's also an issue. So you need to get those guys down. We've seen linebackers get carried a little bit these first 3 games, so they need to continue to work on that and get stronger, more physical when they're coming downhill, and just not giving up. If you hit the guy at 3 yards, get him down. Don't let 2 more yards go, and now you're at a 3rd and 2 instead of a 3rd and 4.
Yeah, that's exactly it. The difference between 3 yards and 5 yards is the difference between, hey, you maybe are in a 3rd and 4 where you're a little more limited versus a 3rd and 1, which is you have to sort of assume they're going to pick it up. He did say Sonny Styles and CJ Hicks are really kind of have separated. They're kind of the starters.
Sonny and Cody.
Sorry, Cody. Yes, sorry, Cody Simon and Sonny Styles. He also talked about Arvell Reese, and there were a couple great quotes about Arvell Reese. One was about the structured course to greatness, and the other was about a flashing light.
Yeah. So he was asked if Arvell Reese could maybe play some will, or if that's not an option. And Jim Knowles like, no, that's not an option because, and he kind of paused, and he's on a structured course to greatness. And it's like, that's one of the best lines I've ever heard. No pressure there, bub, but they don't want to change anything. And then he was asked, when did that light go on for Arvell? Was it in preseason? Like, yeah, it was in preseason, and it was flashing. It's a flashing light. They're just trying to keep the lights on basically with him, which is another great line. And really does a good job of explaining to everybody in a way that we can all understand.
There was also no defensive player of the game for the Marshall game, which in a game that you win by 5 touchdowns, you would think certainly someone merited that. Well, we talked about the standard being the standard, and no one met the standard last week.
Yeah, I asked him why no player of the game. He's like, well, got to speak the truth. And that's, they said they had some guys that graded out as champions, but nobody that played like, like they want a silver bullet to play. So it was, I think it's clearly it's messaging, but also not false. It's like you do need to play better than this, and you need to win your one-on-ones, and everybody needs to play up to their level and not down to the level of the opposition. And first couple of weeks they've done that, and boy, Jim Knowles really seems annoyed by those 2 touchdown drives in that first half.
Yeah, you can tell. It seemed like both he and Ryan Day were a little bit irritated when we were around these guys every week for multiple years, at least for big chunks of the year. You kind of get a sense, and there are weeks that Ryan Day comes in there and he's in a good mood. This was not a good mood Ryan Day. This was not a good mood Jim Knowles. And this is not, I don't remember what the point spread is this weekend, but it's, they're 4-5 touchdown favorites. This is not one that you're probably deeply concerned you're going to lose. But there's also, this is kind of the other piece of the standard is the standard. If they don't feel like they're playing where they need to be right now, they're not happy 3-0 or not.
Yeah, no. And when you're facing, when you just got done facing a quarterback who ran the ball well on you, and until you knocked him out of the game, and now you're about to face Aiden Childs, who in the biggest games they've played is run like 7 to 9 times per game, and that's not just sacks. That's evading pass rush. That's using his mobility. So that will continue to be part of this game, I would assume, because you're going to do what has worked against Ohio State to this point, and Ohio State's going to have to adjust, maybe do some pre-adjusting to prepare for that. But it's a road game in the Big Ten, Tom. Has anything ever happened on the road in the Big Ten for Ohio State when you're 3 touchdown favorites?
This game's not in West Lafayette, Indiana, right?
That is correct.
It's not in Iowa City.
That is correct. And being Michigan State, it is not at Ohio Stadium.
It is not. Yes, Ohio State has not lost to Michigan State at Michigan State in the 21st
So
century.
99 maybe?
1999, yes. That's the last time they lost. That was 23-7.
What happened in the year before that?
Well, it's funny. I went through the game notes. I got here a little early today. Went through the game notes and pulled like the 20 most interesting things I found in the game notes. One of them is Michigan State has only beaten Ohio State 15 times, but 5 of those were over top 5 Ohio State teams: 1972, 1974, 1998, 2013, 2015. So every generation has its own version of the Sparty no brackets complimentary game. The boomers have the 70s. Us Gen Xers, Tony, we have 1998, and the millennials, they have their 2013 and their 2015. So if history is any indication, Michigan State will get Ohio State again at some point. This was another one of these facts, and now I'm gonna get it wrong, but it was something like 5th or 6th year in a row that Ohio State is playing Michigan State as a top 5 team, after the Buckeyes are a top 5 team yet again. So, all right, so that's the
they're playing with fire.
They are. Listen. They have been better off losing to Marshall?
Yes,
maybe. Listen, I'm not here to tell anyone how to do their job. There is on the other side of the ball. I spent a lot of time talking about defense. On the other side of the ball, there are a couple things to keep an eye on there. One of them is the sort of rotation at the right guard position. We saw a little bit of Austin Siereveld. We saw a little bit of Tegra Shabola last Saturday. Sounds like Tegra's still the starter, but Tegra is not the only one who's going to play at right guard on Saturday.
Yeah, and we, as you said, we saw that with Austin Siereveld getting some time, and he'll continue to get some time. And Day was asked about the cohesion and wanting to balance the cohesion with wanting to build that depth, and he's like, well, in practice, these guys switch out all the time. And you've got veterans who are accustomed to playing with each other and can play with whomever. So it sounds like the cohesion, you want it, but there's cohesion with whomever they put in there. But also, I thought it's interesting that this is the second week in a row, I think the Day has said this, that it's not a bad thing for Tegra Shabola to come out of the game and take a series to just take a breather, look at the iPad, see what's going on, have more answers for when he's back out there. And same thing for Siereveld to come out off the field and see, okay, this is what I did wrong. What next time I can do this, and get that instant feedback so that you're more equipped when you go back out there. So it's interesting because it's not something that generally you keep your 5 out there, you send them out there, and that's who you're rolling with. When you look at snap counts over the years, you can see the top 5 guys all have the same number of snap counts for most of the games. That's not going to be the case this year, at least for the foreseeable future with those two.
So we've done all of our reporting so far. I'm going to ask you to get a little speculative here. They're making the rotation at right guard like that. Carson Hinsman has, by all accounts, been completely fine at center. So why are they not doing that at center? Because it feels like you've got Seth McLaughlin. You could certainly, if you're trying to get guys prepared and have some depth because of the number of games you're going to play and the number of snaps everyone's going to have and all that kind of stuff, it seems like it would make sense. Tackle, I get it. It feels like there's probably a bigger drop off between the starting tackles and the starting the backup tackles. Is the center Seth McLaughlin is new, but he's also not, he's a veteran, so he's not in the same boat as Tegra Shabola in terms of needing to take a break and watch the iPad, or is it that there's a bigger gap there? This is one of these things that I didn't think about in time to ask that question today. It just sort of occurred to me that it feels like they presumably feel like Carson Hinsman is in that sort of circle of trust, you would think. So it's interesting that they're not doing that at center.
I think they view Seth McLaughlin as the Will Howard of center. Basically, like, he's too valuable to take off the field. And with him and Donovan Jackson together, the interior is really good. If you're going to rotate 2 guys, you kind of want to keep, I think, the other 2 stationary. You don't want to go crazy with rotation. But also with the way this offensive line, the running game is going, center being so important and the communication being so important, and he being the forefront of that and the protections, I think right now they don't want to mess with that. And I do think there's a bigger gap. Maybe not, Will Howard to Devin Brown or Josh Simmons to whomever, George Fitzpatrick, Zen Mahalski. But I think there's a sizable gap, and they just don't – he's too valuable, in my opinion, to get crazy with it.
All right, so Seth McLaughlin is the Will Howard of the offensive line. That would presumably, by the transitive property, make Will Howard the Seth McLaughlin of the quarterback room. So We had a chance to talk to Will Howard a little bit, got a chance to ask him about, spreading the ball around. You asked Ryan Day about feedback that he gets from Will Howard in terms of what does he go in when Will Howard goes in and gives him feedback about the previous game and about the upcoming game. What is he talking about?
Yeah, first time it's frustrating when you ask a coach something about a quarterback, then you'd also like to ask the quarterback about it, but you don't get called on. But that's neither here nor there. But you said, because I asked like what kind of feedback, and you said, as you said, and it's a lot of in the film room, it's out on the field, it's when everybody's home and you're getting texts, and Chip Kelly and Will Howard are always going back and forth. But you're talking about what plays do you feel great about, what plays do you not feel great about. And then I asked Day, like, does Will ever say, I'd like to get Carnell more involved, I'd like to get this guy more involved? He's like, that's really that comes through the course of the game planning, because they're trying to get everybody involved. So it's not even a conversation that needs to happen, because they're all trying to get Carnell the ball. They're all trying to get Brandon in this. They're trying to get this guy involved. So that's not really part of the conversation. But there is just feedback on, I like this look. I'd prefer it over this. And, just the kind of feedback that you'd want to have from your quarterback, your leader, who sees it the way you see it, who understands what you're seeing, can communicate it with you. And then also is in the film room before any of the quarterback room talk begins or anything on the practice field begins, and he can bring stuff like good questions, answers, solutions, and just another perspective. And it's like, I'm the guy throwing the ball. This is what I see. What about this? And then you can go back and forth, because Chip Kelly has a different perspective than Ryan Day. And I think that's a pretty good triangle you got there.
And one thing that we talk about over and over and over again is the importance of winning in the trenches and the importance of being able to run the ball. And Ryan Day, when he was asked about the defensive line and the sacks, talked about the fact that stopping the run is the number one job. And Will Howard talked about the fact that when they can run the ball effectively on offense, it opens up so many other things. I thought that was kind of interesting. Two different sides of basically the same conversation, where why do you have to stop the run? Well, listen to Will Howard talk about what you're able to do if you're able to run the ball and how that opens up the whole offense.
Yeah, and then with the RPOs, it's like you can't choose correctly if you're a defense. So you're always going to be at a disadvantage. But when we haven't seen much of the deep throws, I think maybe one a game at this point, and that's a lot because the safeties are back, which is going to allow the running game to continue. But eventually you're going to have to, like, hey, you know what? We can't keep giving up 280 yards rushing. We can't keep allowing 12.7 yards per carry. We might want to bring somebody else up. And it's like, but if you do that, now you've got these three receivers and, maybe three defenders for them. And that's not going to go very well, because Will Howard can pick and choose. And as long as he's got time to go through his progressions, somebody's going to be open. He just has to put the ball in the right spot. So, stopping the run, it all starts there. Ryan Day said, stop the run first, and get off the field on third down is like the next thing, basically, in terms of it. That's the byproduct of stopping that run, is that now third down is much easier. And it was that 3 for 3 on third down on that first drive for Marshall that got them down the field and in the end zone.
And there was hang on. That was it. Okay. That was the last thing I was going to ask about that. And then the last thing I wanted to ask you about was Carlos Loughlin. Very interesting question.
That was good.
How long did Ryan Day know Carlos Loughlin before he hired him? And it's the first time he talked to him was on the Zoom where he interviewed him. And when you look at Carlos Loughlin, physically, he looks like the kind of guy that sort of dominates a space. And when you watch him coaching people, he doesn't seem like he's the most concerned about your feelings or about subtlety. He seems to approach everything. He kind of goes into life face first, it seems like. And it sounds like that was the approach he took in the interview with Ohio State, and it sounds like that was a winning approach. Yeah,
Ryan, they said Loughlin basically interviewed them. They get on the Zoom, and Ryan Day basically says, hey, how's it going? Nice to meet you. And then boom, Carlos Loughlin just takes over. He said he had a presentation set and everything that he saw and could do. And he knew all about Ryan Day and Chip Kelly and all of these different things. And then Ryan Day got his background, and it's like all of this stuff. He said pretty much right away that this was the guy for them. And what do you say? Like the number one thing over all of this was just the mentality that he would bring to the football team, aside from all of the scheme stuff and the teaching techniques that were all high level. It was 100% all across the board. And I think we're seeing the results of that. And it's interesting. You talk about how he's not a quiet. He's not. He doesn't care. Not going to be too worried about your feelings. Contrast that to his first day at work when he was on his first day of practice when we talked to him, and how he's like, well, I was just kind of watching today, and just being a very quiet running backs coach. And that is not what he is at all any longer. And that only lasted, a day or two. And then they got the real Coach Locke.
And what's interesting is I think people right now, you look at him and it would be hard to nitpick anything in terms of running back production. Now, he inherited Trevion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, but James Peoples seems like he has sort of hit the ground running, so to speak. So it would be hard to nitpick anything in the approach, but I'm not sure how much you can grade him yet, because if you have two guys who are among the best, the two guys who are tied right now for the most rushing touchdowns in the nation among active players, Trevion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, both have 36, most among active players in the nation. So he didn't build those guys from scratch, but also it would be pretty hard to nitpick anything else right now.
I mean, we've seen him look worse. Just last year. I mean, Quinshon Judkins averaging 4.3 or 4 yards per carry. He's over double that right now. So, everything that we've seen so far has been good. And Day talked about when you bring in guys that you don't know, it brings new perspective. And we've often talked about sometimes the worst hires that coaches make are their buddies. And sometimes the best hires they make are the guys they've never met before. And when you look at Jim Knowles, I know there are still people who don't like him because, well, they gave up 2 touchdowns last week, so that's bad. But a guy that Ryan Day had no prior relationship with, they ended up producing the number 1, 2, or 3 defense by whatever metric you want to look at last year. So clearly that was a good hire. This appears to be a very good hire as well. And then sometimes just keeping the guys that you came in with or that were here when you got here is also a smart thing, like with Brian Hartline.
Yeah, it's interesting. There is no guaranteed this is going to be a home run hire for the most part, because you look at the guys who are brand new to coaching. And, Brian Hartline, when Brian Hartline took over as the wide receivers coach, he was more or less brand new to coaching. First time he's ever held that kind of a position. And that has clearly been about a 10 out of 10 in terms of a wide receiver coach. James Laurinaitis obviously has been great in recruiting, and I don't know how much you're judging his coaching this year based on the linebacker play and how you would grade the linebacker play, but that's sort of a little bit of a maybe you give him an incomplete so far until he's got a couple more years of track record. They have brought in the veteran coaches who have coached other places that haven't worked out at all. They've brought in the veteran coaches who have coached other places that have worked out great. He brought in his buddy Chip Kelly. That worked out great. Urban Meyer brought in Bill Davis. How'd that work out? Well, we're out of time.
Yeah.
But it's
Greg Schiano worked out.
Yeah, Greg Schiano worked out great. So
for the most part,
there is no simple formula for this is going to be a great coach. It's like trying to grade an NFL draft the day of the draft. You can do it, sure, but you're not going to know. How did the Caleb Williams pick get graded? Probably better than it would get graded right now. How will it get graded 3 years from now? I don't know. Yeah. So we'll see.
Yeah, well, and Day gets criticized for the Justin Fry hire because they know each other.
Yeah.
Jeff Hafley, Ryan Day and Jeff Hafley, great friends. That was may still be the best hire of his career. Who knows? Like, that was a very good hire. But, I don't think there is any true formula in this.
No, I don't think so either. One thing that is a true formula, if you hit the thumbs up button, Tony and I will be happy. So go ahead and do that right now. We do want to get to some questions as well.
Hey, Tom, who is not happy right now? The head coach of Ohio State. What did he say about? Are you happy with anything? Do you like anything? What was the quote?
It was. I can find it on. I know Dave Holmes tweeted it. He said, "I don't feel good about anything. No one should feel good about anything." That's.
That was the mood he was in today. So, but please feel good about stuff.
Mika Hanna, Turf Monster, was very active on Saturday.
Yeah, so Mika Hanna says the Turf Monster was very active on Saturday. That was, I think, a direct result of the heat on that field and the Jenny Taft on the sideline zapped it with a laser and said it was 145 degrees on the field, which I can believe. And at that temperature, there's little rubber pellets, like chopped up old tires, in there between the blades of fake grass. And at some point that starts melting a little bit. Like it's like the videos of summer in Phoenix where you can cook an egg on the sidewalk.
Well, that's what you should do one of these days, next year maybe.
I think they might get a little upset if I cooked an egg and melted an egg into the turf. I might not get invited back. So maybe not, but I think the heat there probably compromised the turf a little bit just because of the heat and the humidity and all that kind of stuff. But we'll see. I know people are constantly saying like, oh, there's always problems with slipping on the turf. I think there's a little bit of confirmation bias there, because it's not. If you go out there and shuffle your feet on that turf, it's not slick all the time. So I think there might be. You see a guy slip and you remember all the other times you saw a guy slip. But there's a lot of guys making cuts during the course of a game, and they're not all just falling like they're on black ice.
Yeah, no, I would agree. Also, these are incredible athletes making cuts that shouldn't be possible, and sometimes they're not.
Yeah.
Next one is from Mike. Can this team stop the cheaters up north on 3rd and 2?
So can Ohio State stop Michigan?
Oh, how'd you know he was talking about
3rd
Michigan?
and 2? So I think one of the keys is going to be not letting it get to 3rd and 2. That's
the biggest key.
That's the biggest thing. That's one of the things that
How did it get there?
Yeah, Jim Knowles talked about it in terms of getting the tackle and holding them at 3 yards versus 5 yards per, on a run. So that's one of the things. The Michigan offensive line has not been dominant this year. This is not a Michigan offensive line like you saw in 2021, 2022, 2023. This is an offensive line that's taken a step back. Where will they be at the end of the season? We'll find out. It feels like they're still kind of shuffling centers and that kind of stuff at times. I'm gonna guess that the defensive approach against Michigan is going to be substantially different than the defensive approach against Marshall was. Yes, the Marshall offensive line is not as good as the Michigan offensive line. Marshall's quarterback can throw the ball downfield. Michigan, depending on who they have at quarterback, either is going to have a runner or a guy who can throw the ball downfield. There is not an and there. It is not and or. It is they can do this or they can do that. That feels like that's going to make them a little more predictable, which would presumably make it easier for Ohio State to stop.
Well, and 3rd and 2 is a losing proposition for a defense anyway, because even if you stop them on 3rd and 2 and they gain a yard, now you're 4th and 1. Can you stop them from getting a yard? And so we know Michigan likes to go for it on 4th down. They did it last week in their own territory. So the key will be not getting there, and it's tough to stop anybody 3rd and 2, whether they can throw or not, because Michigan, as we know, will throw out 6 offensive linemen. They'll put 6 offensive linemen out there. They'll have 2 or 3 tight ends out there, and then they'll run off that. Now they are kind of soft in the middle right now, which is going to be difficult for them, but they will be much better by the time they get to Columbus at the end of November. But 3rd and 2 is always a losing proposition for a defense, just based on the odds.
Yep.
From Odysseus, who has the cot of shame this week?
Who has the cot of shame this weekend from Odysseus? Did you grade the bold predictions? I have not looked.
No, I have not, but we kind of talked through it after the post-game show, and I think we might be tired like 2-2.
So it sounds like Kevin.
Sorry, Kev. Sorry, Special K. Sorry, K-pop.
Okay, Todd. With 1D.
No. All right. Yeah, I don't know. I think, honestly, we tied is the way I'm remembering it. But I will check with Stats Inc. And see what they had to say, see if we can figure this out and find me a win.
Bold predictions, tiebreaker off on the Friday night game, whatever the Friday night game is this week, and do a one bold prediction off, and maybe we do a bold over under or something like that.
Okay, we'll figure it out.
Virginia Tech Miami is Friday night.
Virginia Tech Miami is Friday night.
There's a Big Ten game,
but then we have to watch Virginia Tech Miami. So
yeah, it's going to be a bad one.
Steve off of Twitter, I think our first Twitter question. What is your assessment of JT Tuimoloau's play thus far?
The assessment of JT Tuimoloau's play thus far, I did see, I think, very good rating from PFF. I know we talked about it earlier with the sacks, and that's how everybody grades a defensive end. I think with him, we expect to see him more. You expect to see him in the backfield more, making more plays. I think the worst thing he ever did was have that Penn State game where it's like, oh, this is how he should. We need to see this more often. It's like you don't see that once a decade. So you don't expect that kind of stuff to happen. But I think you would like to see him have a 2-sack game. Like, why can Josiah Stewart do it at Michigan, but JT Tuimoloau doesn't? But again, as Ryan Day said, you defend the offenses that you're seeing. They're not going to just sit back and wait for JT Tuimoloau to get to them. But I don't have a huge issue with how he's playing based on what they're doing and based on the fact that they're not really giving up any points. Would you like to see him make more plays? You'd like to see everybody make more plays. I've seen criticism of Caleb Downs, and it's like I think people want maybe too much from all of these guys, when if I'm just doing my 111th and I'm doing it exactly right and the ball never comes to me, is that my fault?
I remember covering Pickerington Newark game in 2020? Yeah, you and I were there, right? And it was Sonny Styles, Lorenzo Styles was there too, but we were there watching. So Lorenzo Styles Jr. and Sonny Styles playing for Pickerington, and Sonny Styles is playing safety. And we covered the entire game, and there was not a ball that ended up within 10 yards of him. And it was because the Pickerington pass rush was absolutely eating Newark's lunch, and they couldn't get the ball. It was an Alex Orji offense. They could not get the ball 10 yards downfield to even give Sonny Styles an opportunity to make a play. So you walked away from that, and it was like, well, how would you evaluate Sonny Styles' play? It was like shrug emoji. I don't know. This is one of these things where I'm going to read you. I tweeted out photos of JT Tuimoloau screaming to himself in the tunnel before the game. Just thought, hey, these are cool pictures. And I said, how intense does JT Tuimoloau get in the tunnel moments before the game? This intense. I'm just going to read you a selection of the replies. It was 10 replies. It was all the same reply. You sure he's not yawning? I'd like to see him transfer that to the field. Against Michigan, 404 not found. I wish JT would just pretend he's playing Penn State every week. He was on the field. Would be awesome if he channeled that into the game next time. Did he play Saturday? He played on Saturday. Did he play on Saturday? Would be nice if he showed up on the score sheet too. So there you go. That's your that's sort of the perception right now. But if the coaching staff felt like, yeah, this guy's not doing anything, this guy's not making any kind of an impact, they have shuffled guys in and out before. This is not someone that they're looking at and going, this guy can't do anything. Why? What a bum. So there's maybe of any player on the team, there might be the biggest gap in perception between the coaching staff and the fan base around him.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because coaches, from what we hear from them, he's the one thing you can count on. He's going to do what you tell him to, what you tell him to do. He's going to get done. And maybe they should just tell him, go get the quarterback every time. And maybe he would do that and make people happy. But yeah, I think criticism of defensive ends is always interesting, because it's solely based on sacks. And if you are not trying to accomplish that, and you're not being given an opportunity to accomplish that, whether it's from the quarterback, the RPO stuff like we talked about, like, you're going to look terrible. You're not going to create the numbers that everybody wants. But so much of it is just based on what the defense is doing, what they're supposed to be doing. And of course, you still need to get home at some point, but no defensive end is really going to get there in like 1.4 seconds or whatever.
And I think back a couple of years to Javonte Jean-Baptiste when he was at Ohio State, and there was kind of the same, why did they bother wasting snaps on this guy kind of perception? And then he goes to Notre Dame in a little bit of a different defense and a little bit of a different role, and has a really good final season. And I saw on Monday night, he got his first NFL sack. So obviously the talent is there. And I think that's sort of the same situation with JT, where you're going to see it at times. It is not going to be the Penn State game every single time. That's just that you remember the Penn State game because it is an outlier for not just for him, but for the entirety of the defensive end position, basically for the history of college football. He is still the last Ohio State player to have 2 interceptions in one game, and he's a defensive end. Like that's and that did not just happen last week. That happened a couple of years ago. So that is an incredible outlier, and so that's not really a fair standard to judge him against. And we'll see where he ends up later in the season, and if they do stop Michigan on 3rd and 2, the perception of him is going to change, because a lot of this is sort of tinted by the fact that Jim, you talked about the criticism of Jim Knowles, and statistically, yes. But you say that, and I would almost guarantee you, somewhere in the comments on our YouTube, someone was saying, yeah, but they haven't gotten off the field against Michigan in the second half the last 2 years, so ... And there is a certain amount of, until you do it, you haven't done it kind of thing. So I think there is something of an unfair standard with him, and something of a little bit of a misunderstanding maybe with him. But also, I get it. I mean, I see where people are coming from.
Yeah, I agreed. I mean, this is how defensive ends are judged. It's by sacks, and we're not watching the film and getting the grades and what they're supposed to be doing. So we look at the numbers, and it's like, shouldn't you have more numbers? Other players have had more numbers. We've seen this happen before. You were a 5-star, number 1 player in the country. The expectations are numbers, and the coaches would tell you the expectations are fine. Now, are coaches always going to be truthful? No.
Super chat from Stray Dog. I like JT Tuimoloau and Jack inside with quicker ends off the ball outside. They will be fine in Big Ten play, but I see them more inside in the NFL. Go Bucks.
So Stray Dog saying that he likes JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer inside more than outside, and that may be where their future is in the NFL, and that's certainly a possibility. That's basically what they're doing in that Rushman package. Is you're seeing Tuimoloau, Sawyer, Caden Curry, and Kenyatta Jackson out there. And I know I saw Kenyatta Jackson and Caden Curry on the outside at least sometimes. I think they might be mixing that up a little bit, because I saw someone else say the other way around.
Well, Caden Curry, his stat came from inside.
Yeah.
And that's something he played in high school. He was a fantastic defensive tackle in high school, but was a 6'3", 250-pound defensive tackle in high school. And now he's finally big enough and strong enough to where he can do that in the Rushman. I think JT Tuimoloau is probably suited for that as well, but a lot of you have to get buy-in from the players to do it. I remember Nick Bosa as a sophomore was like, I'm like established enough now that I don't have to go inside. I was like, I don't want to go inside anymore. I'm good enough outside. And it's like, yeah, you are. Yeah. In 2017, you don't need to push him inside anymore, because this is also a guy, Nick Bosa, who was playing defensive tackle as a true freshman in big-time high school football. I think he's probably to the point where, like, I would just like to stay outside. Yeah. But with JT Tuimoloau, Jim Knowles even talked about the bear front with Sawyer and Tuimoloau way out as the kind of the outside linebackers with 3 defensive tackles in between them. And I wouldn't be shocked if you see some of that against Michigan or any other kind of maybe Iowa in 2 weeks.
And one thing is, you want to see that in terms of a pass rush. I don't know that you want to see that right now this season if it's 1st and 10 or 3rd and 2. There's a reason those guys are not playing inside, except they put the Rushman package in when it's 3rd and 8. Yeah. 3rd and 10. Because that's a very predictable passing situation where you don't have to worry about them running ISO or inside zone or something like that, because they're going to be throwing the ball. So that's why they sub like that situationally. But you can't do that every play.
Yeah.
Let's see. Troy V. I was on a show earlier, and an Iowa fan said that Iowa has a good chance to beat Ohio State. I let him have his dream and didn't react. Hello.
So does Iowa have a chance to beat Ohio State? I mean, sure, they have a chance to beat Ohio State. I don't know if it's a good chance to beat Ohio State. I think the problem that you're going to run into is, we talked about this with Michigan a little bit earlier in the week on the Michigan Monday show, where if you don't have an offense that's going to be able to score 30, 40 points, that gives you a much narrower path to victory. Like I have nothing but respect for the Iowa defense, and that is one of the best coached, most well-schemed, just we have a plan, we execute the plan, full stop, end of story kind of defenses. The offense is still cheeks. I mean, the offense, they were better than Michigan was in terms of throwing the ball last week, but they're very one-dimensional. And, that's at least one more dimension than they've had in some recent years. Yeah. But they're going to, unless Ohio State turns the ball over and gives them a score, which happened the last time Iowa was here, they had a scoop and score touchdown. Unless Ohio State does that, Iowa's going to score, 17 points with a decent game, 20 points?
I feel like 21 wins it.
Yes, if Ohio State gets to 21, I don't see Iowa scoring more than that without a defensive touchdown. I don't know. I mean, how confident are you that they're going to be able to hold Ohio State to 21? Not particularly, right?
I really like Caleb Johnson at running back, and he's maybe leading the nation in rushing right now, and he's an explosive guy. Ohio State has limited the explosive plays, as we know so far. But yeah, there's only so much offense that Iowa can do without getting help. And right now, this Ohio State defense isn't helping. The Ohio State offense isn't helping. So Iowa theoretically would have to do it on their own, and I don't think they can.
No, I think that's one of those games where there's a way they win, but there's a way they win. There's lots of ways that Ohio State wins. Iowa has to win a very specific way. I go back to the 2009 Purdue game where, the Ohio State came in and there was a way Purdue won that game, but it involved Ohio State turning the ball over 5 times and kicking some field goals instead of scoring touchdowns. And sure, there's a way that happens. Tony, I have watched a Brian Ferentz offense score 55 points against Ohio State in person, live and in person. Now, it involved a pick six and a fake punt and just 1,000 yards of passing to the tight ends. Sure, it's possible. That's one where that's a game that I think Ohio State fans are going to come away not nearly as appreciative as they should about what the final score might be, because that's one where it's going to be 27-13, and everyone's going to go 27-13. This is a team that lost to Iowa State. Teams just don't score 50-something points against Iowa very often. Ohio State did the last time they were here, but Iowa turned the ball over, I think, 6 times in that game, 5 or 6 times. So they got a little help to do that too. It is just not that easy to score a bunch of points against Iowa. So it'll probably be close, but Iowa's probably going to be good enough that it'll keep it close, but not good enough that they'll be able to actually win it without a lot of help. So that will do it. We appreciate you guys joining us for this special live episode of Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning. If you have not hit the thumbs up button already, please do that. If you have not hit the subscribe button or hit that bell, please do that as well. We're going to have plenty more coverage all week long, heading up to the first road game of the season, the first Big Ten game of the season. Ohio State at Michigan State. That game is at 7:30 now, not 7 o'clock. Adjust your tailgating and beverage consumption patterns accordingly. They push that kickoff back 30 minutes because shrug emoji. I don't know. Just to make our lives slightly more of a pain in the butt. I don't know. But we will be up in East Lansing on Friday night, covering the Buckeyes as they get there. Plenty of coverage Friday night and all day Saturday, heading all the way into the pregame. Post-game live show, all the stuff you've come to know and expect from us at BuckeyeHuddle.com and YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We will talk to you tomorrow.